Okie doke. So, okay. So here we have the Enchantress, and let's zoom in and talk about footwear. I know that's the first thing you thought when you came to a channel for 3D is footwear. But I had to put something on her feet, right? And what I decided to do was this is just a plane that I wrapped around her foot and shaped. I loop cut it a few times, and then I applied the solidify modifier to give it thickness. That's how I made the outside. These, now I was worried about these at first because I'm new to resin printing and I wasn't sure how small I could get. But these printed awesome. As you could see, it's not even a millimeter high. And the jewels are just a UV sphere cut in half and stretched longer one axis to make it an oval. And these are just a cylinder that I shrunk down on the z-axis, turned sideways, and then extruded the size out. Now I wanted to make them hold her boots on, right? Give it some sense of realism, even though I don't even know if I don't know if these boots would work in real life. Probably not. But it looks good. The weird problem I found, right, is so I wanted to have one strap come around the back attached to the buckle, right? And all of this tiny detail really comes out great. So I was able to model all of this stuff and it prints wonderfully. But so one half of the strap comes around and attaches to the buckle. The other half goes through the buckle, comes out held down by this loop. The problem is, I found, when joining all of this, that you can't join a mesh to itself. So like these two ends, I couldn't join them to themselves. So what I had to do was I cut it back in here and then joined these pieces together and then made it a one whole piece, right? That actually worked out really nice. So sometimes you gotta get a little creative with things in order to make it work. um, the sandals of the boot, this is one piece, right? I think it's just extruded from a square, and you can see everything from about here down is not going to show. It goes into the base. I wanted a nice solid contact with the base because I have found that no matter how you glue things, like if I would have left this flat and not put these extra pieces on and just tried to glue that flat down to the base, it probably wouldn't have stuck. Right? So I wanted a nice, good attachment to the base, and that's what these parts down here are for. So I just extruded down a little chunk, and then what I did was I copied, I went in there, I copied that chunk and made that a cutter, right? Expanded it just a little bit. So what I would do, here, let's go in here. You actually got to get the whole thing. Right now I go Shift D, and then we hit P and selection. Now if I go Tab, come on, there you go. You see we got a whole separate piece. And then if you look at it, now let's still got the background. There we go. Now if I hit Tab, it's a little tricky with the screen capture software, and the vertices count on this has gotten kind of high. Okay, so now you just, and I found the tolerances, and I'm going to hit G and just pull this out a little bit. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And then we're just going to bring it down. So you just want it bigger. I don't mind if it's a little deeper, but I wanted a snug fit. Right? And now we've got the top is still not enclosed. So I select all those vertices, hit F, and it'll create a face. And I hit those vertices and hit F to create a face. And now it is perfect for a cutter, right? It will cut a hole that's just a little bit bigger than the actual heel. And that's really what you want, so it will slide in. And you do the same thing with the other parts. And I also did it with the the staff is not in this one, or it's not, at least not turned on, so I can't show you with that. But it's the same thing. You just select it, copy it, expand it just a little bit. You could also try doing scale, but sometimes that doesn't work because it scales things in unusual directions in some cases. So depending upon the situation, either I will scale it up just a little bit, or I will physically drag vertices out. And you can see here I actually sculpted the foot inside the shoe, right? So there is something in there. And here you can see, oh look, you can actually see in this one the toes are all separate. So I box modeled the toes, then I subsurfed them, and then I applied that subsurf and I brought it in and I sculpted each toe. And then what I did was I would join the toes one at a time, so that I could at least, so I could smooth out the inside edges. And that's how I did the toes. Now the other thing of interest here I wanted to show you is the chain. Now there's a bunch of videos on how to make chain, and how you can move it with a curve, right? So here you can see I've absolutely done that, and I'll try to remember to put one of those tutorials in the description of the video, because it's really not worth recreating it here. I will just go over it briefly. But here's my problem with that. Okay, see, now that is the curve that's attached to this chain, but you can see that in trying to get it to wrap around her body, it's also shrunk one of these chains. And, of course, I never saw that in any of the videos. See the way it does control the chain, but it's very difficult to handle. And like I said, it doesn't help at all that the vertices count in this is very high. So towards the end of most of my projects, it gets difficult to work with. All right, now I'll hit G again to try to move that vertices. Well, it's actually a little better, but that one still seems a bit small. What I ended up doing was I ended up going into, so let's deselect that. I'll select this. So I went to Object, you go into Convert, and Convert to Mesh, right? Now I can go in there, and if you hit one vertices, right, you select one vertices, keep the cursor over it and hit L, it will select the entire thing, right? Because these aren't linked yet. I eventually did link them all. I joined them all to the body. So everything is one solid mesh. So what I ended up doing was I deleted the ones that are like, I think it was this one. That one was misshapen. I deleted it. I ended up copying this and moving it in. And I ended up doing it by hand in the end. But the curves did get me roughly in place. And I'd love to see if anyone knows a better way to control this. I'd love to hear it, because while this did work, you know, using the curve to control the chain, it deforms the chain. It's very difficult to get it to work. You know, I spent a lot of time. The same thing with the hair, right? This is earlier, so it looks like there was still, like if you look at the back here, this is not exactly level. And you have to get everything perfect. Let's see. Do not save. Let's go in here. This is all the files. I save everything all along the way. Any major change I make, I save as a new version before I make that change, so I can always go back a step if I need to for any reason. Okay, now if you look at the hair here, it is much better, right? Everything, and this is not even the final version. Yeah, see, it's better, but this is, and the thing, when I was first doing it, I thought, okay, what's the best way to do this? And you can see here's the width of the strip of hair I decided to use in the end. And at first I thought, no, let's make a thin strip of hair, right? Because that'll make it look more than hair, look more like hair. But I could not get them to join to the model. But this, it's also very hard to control. You know, you see how you move that, but the whole thing starts to wiggle. It's like what you do on one part of the curve affects the other parts of the curve. And then you gotta find a way to get it to lay flat. Like, especially when you're trying to curve it like that, I find that a lot of times it will move in unpredictable ways, and you have to sit there and mess with it and fiddle with it until you can get it to calm down and relax. Okay, we are not saving that. Let's see if I can go somewhere near the end. Let's try. Let's see what this one looks like. Okay. Now, you can see here the hair towards the end. I spent a lot of time getting all of this stuff to be at the same height, right? Otherwise, she looks like she's got some crazy wild hairdo. You know, and getting all of this to flow in with each other like hair. You know, and you don't want to see. There's a few spots here where there's still like one is on top of the other. I try to avoid that as much as possible because it makes it difficult to Boolean join everything together if a lot of the vertices are on top of each other. And then what I also wanted to do to make printing easier is now normally hair would not really do this. It would not curve back onto itself so it would lay perfectly on her back, since it would just hang straight down. But that would make it difficult to print. You'd have to put supports all along the bottom of this, and then you'd have to clean it up, or you have to do supports that don't penetrate the surface very deep. I will talk about supports and what I had to do to get her to work well. But part of that is thinking about the model as you're making it. Like all of this had to be supported, but I wanted that little detail in there so bad that I was willing to go through it. You know, and it's really not that hard. All you have to do is stick supports here and maybe one under there, and it prints fine. And resin supports are like worlds better than filament supports. Like FDM stuff, I still print without them because supports ruins everything. I've watched video after a video. I have messed and messed and messed with it, but no matter what I do, I cannot get an unscarred part out of a support. I prefer to just cut things in half, print it flat, and glue it together. It wastes less time and less plastic. But with resin printing, it's just so much easier. But the stuff with curves, it doesn't work as easily for me as it does in everybody's videos. And there's some great videos. I learned how to do it from those other videos. And you just search hair with curves or chains, how to do chains in Blender, and you come up with bunches of them. They'll all show you the same thing. Sometimes they're roughly a little different. I saw one that had procedural chains, but my machine can't handle it. I tried to do it, but it just can't handle it. So you also got to work with the limitations of your computer. My machine is about 12 years old. And I'm using Blender 3. If I go any higher, the mesh starts turning red, which basically means it's more than my computer can handle. I can still work with it, but it's very difficult. But there you go. That's her shoes and her hair and the chains. But next, I think I will. I'll talk about supporting her in. I use Chitterbox, and it really works well. She prints nicely with a few. There are a few things you have to be aware of. Let's save this for the next video.